Imagine you are swimming in the crystal clear waters of a tropical ocean millions of years ago. The sun is shining through the surface, and everything seems peaceful, until a shadow the size of a city bus glides silently beneath your feet. You look down and realize that the modern great white shark you were so afraid of is nothing more than a snack for the titan lurking in the depths. The ocean has always been a place of mystery. But in the distant past, it was a literal hall of horrors filled with creatures so massive and bizarre they seem like they belong in a high-budget monster movie. Today, we are diving deep into the abyss of time to meet 12 terrifying sea creatures that actually existed. These aren't legends or myths. These were flesh and blood rulers of the prehistoric waves. We are starting right now with a predator that turned the entire ocean into its personal buffet. Let us begin with the obvious king of the deep, the Megalodon. You have probably heard the name, but it is hard to truly grasp the scale of this animal, reaching lengths of up to 18 meters. The Megalodon was essentially a great white shark stretched out to the size of a semi-truck. Its teeth were the size of human hands, and its bite force was enough to crush a small car like a tin can. But what makes the Megalodon truly terrifying wasn't just its size, it was its diet. This shark specialized in eating whales. It would swim up from the murky depths and strike the fins or tails of massive prehistoric whales to immobilize them before finishing them off. For 20 million years, nothing in the ocean was safe from this apex predator. It only vanished about 3.5 million years ago, likely because the oceans cooled and its favorite prey migrated to waters that were too cold for the giant shark to follow. But the Megalodon wasn't the only giant in the neighborhood. Enter Leviathan melville, the prehistoric sperm whale that actually gave the Megalodon a run for its money. Named after the biblical Leviathan and the author of Moby Dick, this whale was a nightmare version of the modern sperm whale. While today's sperm whales have small teeth only in their lower jaws and mostly eat squid, Leviathan had massive interlocking teeth in both its upper and lower jaws. These teeth were over 36 centimeters long. To put that in perspective, that is longer than a standard ruler. Leviathan was roughly the same size as the Megalodon and lived in the same waters at the same time. Scientists believe these two titans lived in a state of constant competition, likely avoiding each other because a fight between them would have been catastrophic for both. Imagine a battle between a giant shark and a whale with teeth like steak knives. The water would have churned for miles. Moving back even further in time, we encounter a creature that looks like it was assembled from spare parts of different animals. This is Helicoprion, also known as the buzzsaw shark. Living about 270 million years ago, this creature had a lower jaw that formed a spiral of teeth. For decades, paleontologists were baffled by where this tooth whorl actually went on the body. Some thought it was on the nose. Others thought it was on the dorsal fin, but modern scans have revealed it was tucked inside the lower jaw, acting like a circular saw. When the Helicoprion closed its mouth, the spiral of teeth would rotate backward, slicing through soft-bodied prey like squid with terrifying efficiency. It lived through the greatest mass extinction in Earth's history, proving that having a circular saw in your mouth is a pretty good survival strategy. Now let's talk about something that shouldn't be that big, but was. Imagine a sea scorpion. Now imagine it the size of a person. That is Dunkleosteus renaniae. This was the largest arthropod ever discovered, reaching 2.5 meters in length. It lived in estuaries and rivers around 400 million years ago. Imagine walking along the shore and seeing a giant armored scorpion with massive pincers reaching out for your ankles. Dunkleosteus was a highly agile swimmer and likely an ambush predator, lurking in the clouded waters of ancient river deltas. Because of its size and armor, it had almost no natural enemies. It was the absolute ruler of the shallow waters, proving that even the creepiest crawlies from our nightmares have roots in reality. If you think modern crocodiles are scary, you haven't met Sarcosuchus imperator, better known as Super Croc. While it spent a lot of time in rivers, it was a frequent visitor to ancient coastal waters. Stretching over 12 meters long and weighing up to 8 tons, this beast made modern saltwater crocodiles look like lizards. Its snout alone was as long as an adult human. The most terrifying part about Sarcosuchus was its ambush capability. It could sit perfectly still just below the surface, looking like a harmless fallen log, until a dinosaur came down for a drink. With one explosive lunge, it would clamp its massive jaws shut and drag even a medium-sized dinosaur into the water. Its teeth were designed not just for meat, but for crushing bone and armor. It was the ultimate gatekeeper of the water's edge. Let's descend into the truly alien world of the Cambrian period, about 500 million years ago. This was the era of Anomalocaris, the world's first true apex predator. At a time when most life on Earth was only a few centimeters long and lived in the mud, Anomalocaris grew to be a meter long. In the world of the Cambrian, that made it a giant. It had a pair of spiked feeding arms that it used to grab prey and pull it toward a ring-shaped mouth filled with sharp plates. It had massive, sophisticated compound eyes that gave it a huge advantage over the nearly blind creatures it hunted. For millions of years, if you were a small trilobite minding your own business, the shadow of an Anomalocaris passing overhead was the last thing you would ever see. It was the prototype for every monster that followed. Speaking of monsters, we have to mention Dunkleosteus. This was a massive armored fish that lived about 360 million years ago. It didn't have teeth in the traditional sense. Instead, its skull was covered in massive, self-sharpening bony plates that acted like shears. Dunkleosteus could open its mouth in a fraction of a second, creating a vacuum that sucked prey directly into its jaws. Once the jaws closed, the bony plates would slice through bone and armor like a hot knife through butter. It was 6 meters long and covered in thick, bony armor that made it look like a biological tank. It feared nothing, and its bite force was among the highest of any fish to ever live. If you were a shark in the Devonian period, you weren't the predator, you were the prey of Dunkleosteus. Now let's look at the Mosasaurus, the star of the modern Jurassic movies. While the movies might have exaggerated its size a little bit, the real Mosasaurus was still a 20-meter-long nightmare. It wasn't a dinosaur. It was actually a giant marine lizard, closely related to modern monitor lizards and snakes. Mosasaurus had a second set of teeth in the roof of its mouth that pointed backward. This meant that once it grabbed something, there was no escaping. The more the prey struggled, the deeper it was pulled into the throat. It was incredibly fast and agile, using its powerful tail to launch itself at prey. By the late Cretaceous, Mosasaurus had become so dominant that it likely drove several other groups of marine reptiles into decline. It was the undisputed master of the shallow seas right up until the asteroid hit. For those who find snakes unsettling, meet Titanoboa. While it is often thought of as a land animal, Titanoboa was semi-aquatic, much like a modern anaconda, but on a much vaster scale. Reaching lengths of 13 meters and weighing more than a ton, this snake thrived in the swampy rivers and coastal waters of what is now South America shortly after the dinosaurs disappeared. It lived in a world where the average temperature was much higher than it is today, allowing cold-blooded reptiles to grow to impossible sizes. Titanoboa could stay submerged for long periods, waiting for giant turtles or crocodiliforms to swim by. It didn't use venom, it used pure, overwhelming constrictive force. Being squeezed by a Titanoboa would feel like having several steamrollers pass over your chest at once. Let's go deeper and meet the Shastasaurus, the largest marine reptile ever discovered. This was an ichthyosaur that grew to a staggering 21 meters in length. Unlike its dolphin-like relatives, Shastasaurus was a specialized suction feeder. It had a long, toothless snout, and would use its massive throat to suck in huge quantities of squid or fish. While it might not seem as aggressive as a Megalodon, its size alone made it terrifying. Imagine a creature longer than 2 school buses rising from the dark blue depths towards your boat. It lived during the Triassic period and represented the peak of marine reptile size. Even though it didn't have giant teeth, something that big moving in the water creates a level of displacement and power that is hard to imagine. Next is Basilosaurus, which translates to king lizard. But don't let the name fool you. This was actually an early whale. Living about 40 million years ago, Basilosaurus had a long, eel-like body that could stretch up to 18 meters. Unlike modern whales, it still had tiny vestigial hind limbs, a reminder of its land-dwelling ancestors. Its skull was filled with massive, jagged teeth designed for crushing and tearing meat. Recent studies of Basilosaurus fossils have found the crushed skulls of smaller whales inside their stomach area, proving that this was a predator that hunted its own kind. It probably swam like a giant sea serpent, undulating its body through the water. If you saw its long, sinuous form appearing through the mist of an ancient lagoon, you would swear you were looking at a dragon. Finally, we have the Plesiosaurus, often nicknamed Predator X. This was a short-necked plesiosaur that lived during the Jurassic period. It had a massive head, nearly 3 meters long, filled with teeth that were 30 centimeters in length. Its bite force has been estimated to be 4 times more powerful than that of a Tyrannosaurus rex. It used 4 massive flippers to literally fly through the water, making it incredibly fast for its size. It was a hunter of other marine reptiles, specialized in taking down large prey with a single, devastating bite. In its time, it was the ultimate weapon of the ocean. Nothing could outrun it, and nothing could survive a direct hit from its massive jaws. The ocean has a way of hiding its secrets, and these 12 creatures remind us that for most of Earth's history, we would have been at the very bottom of the food chain. The water was a place of giants and nightmares, where armor, size, and bite force were the only things that mattered. It is fascinating to realize that the blue world we see today, as dangerous as it may feel, is actually much calmer than it was for millions of years. But next time you are standing on a beach and looking out at the horizon, just remember that we have only explored a tiny fraction of the ocean floor. Who knows what other titans are still waiting to be discovered in the fossil record, or perhaps even hiding in the deepest, darkest trenches of the modern world. The scale of these animals is a testament to the power of evolution. When oxygen levels were different, when the climate was warmer, and when the food sources were more abundant, nature produced monsters that defy our current understanding of biological limits. The Megalodon and the Leviathan weren't just big, they were the absolute limit of what a predator could be. The Dunkleosteus wasn't just a fish, it was a living fortress. These animals represent chapters in a history book that is written in stone and submerged in salt water. Think about the environment that supported a predator like the Mosasaurus. The oceans were teeming with life so abundant that a 20-meter lizard could find enough food to maintain its massive metabolism. The energy required just to move a body of that size through the water is immense. Every one of these creatures had to be a master of its craft. Whether it was the suction feeding of the Shastasaurus or the crushing power of the supercroc, each found a way to become the most efficient hunter in its specific niche. Prehistoric oceans were not just battlefields. They were complex ecosystems where these giants interacted in ways we are still trying to understand. How did the Helicoprion survive for millions of years with such a bizarre jaw? How did the Jacolopterus grow so large in freshwater systems? These are the questions that keep paleontologists up at night. Every time a new fossil is found, it changes our view of what was possible. We used to think the Megalodon was the only king. Then we found the Leviathan. We used to think ichthyosaurs were small. Then we found the Shastasaurus. We are living in a rare moment of Earth's history where the largest animals in the ocean are gentle giants like the blue whale. But for the vast majority of time, the biggest things in the water were the things that wanted to eat you. It is a humbling thought. The sea has a memory, and it is a long, dark, and tooth-filled one. We are just lucky that we are here now, during a time when we can study these magnificent horrors from the safety of the shore, rather than meeting them face to face in the blue. As we look back at these 12 titans, from the buzzsaw jaw of the Helicoprion to the crushing shears of the Dunkleosteus, we see a recurring theme of nature's ingenuity. Evolution doesn't care about what looks normal, it only cares about what works. A spiral of teeth works. Armor-plated skin works. Long, snake-like bodies work. The diversity of these ancient predators shows that there are 1,000 different ways to be the most terrifying thing in the water. Paleontology is a detective story. We take a fragment of a tooth or a piece of a vertebrae and try to reconstruct an entire world. When we look at a tooth from a plesiosaurus, we aren't just looking at a fossil. We are looking at the evidence of a bite that could snap a boat in half. When we see the tiny hind legs of a Basilosaurus, we are looking at the transition of life from the land back into the deep. These creatures are our link to a past that is so different from our own it might as well be another planet. The ocean is the cradle of life, but it has also been the graveyard of millions of species. For every monster we know about, there are likely 10 more that never left a fossil behind, or whose remains are buried miles beneath the ocean floor where we will never reach them. The 12 creatures we talked about today are just the ones that were kind enough to leave us a trail. They represent the peak of their eras, the ultimate survivors and the ultimate hunters. It's also worth considering the fate of these giants. Most of them didn't vanish because they were outcompeted by something bigger. They vanished because the world changed around them. The climate cooled, the sea levels dropped, or a massive event like an asteroid impact shifted the entire balance of the planet. Even the most terrifying predator is at the mercy of the environment. The Megalodon was a god of the sea, but it couldn't survive a change in water temperature. This reminds us that as powerful as these creatures were, they were still part of a delicate web. Today, researchers use incredibly advanced technology to bring these creatures back to life in digital form. We can now simulate the swim stroke of a Mosasaurus or the suction force of a Shastasaurus. We can calculate exactly how much pressure a Dunkleosteus could put on its jaw plates. This allows us to see these animals not just as static bones in a museum, but as living, breathing hunting machines. It makes the terror they would have inspired feel much more real. The story of life in the ocean is a story of constant adaptation. When the first fish crawled out onto land, they left behind a world that was already becoming dangerous. When some of their descendants returned to the water millions of years later, they had to evolve into giants just to stay alive. The Basilosaurus and the Mosasaurus are the results of that return journey. They are terrestrial designs perfected for a watery world. What is the most terrifying part of this list? For some, it is the sheer size of the Megalodon. For others, it's the alien nature of the Anomalocaris. But perhaps the most unsettling thought is that these things were real. They actually swam in the same oceans we sail today. They saw the same sun and lived in the same water. The only thing separating us from them is a vast stretch of time. If you could step into a time machine and go back a few million years, these are the neighbors you would have to deal with every time you went for a swim. Respect for the prehistoric world is something that grows the more you learn about it. These animals weren't mindless monsters. They were the pinnacle of their time. They were perfectly suited for the world they lived in. The armor of the Dunkleosteus was an engineering marvel. The vision of the Anomalocaris was a technological leap. The hearing and sonar of early whales like Basilosaurus were the beginning of some of the most complex senses in the animal kingdom. As we reach the end of our journey through the ancient deep, take a moment to appreciate the incredible diversity of life on our planet. We share the Earth with amazing creatures today, but they are just the latest in a very long line of extraordinary beings. The 12 sea creatures we explored today were the heavyweights of their time, the champions of the abyss, and the undisputed rulers of the waves. The prehistoric ocean was a place of high stakes and incredible beauty, even if that beauty was often accompanied by a set of 30-centimeter teeth. It was a world that tested the limits of biology and produced results that we are still trying to wrap our heads around. From the smallest Cambrian hunter to the largest shark to ever live, each of these animals played a part in the long, winding story of life on Earth. So, the next time you find yourself at the ocean, staring out at the vast blue horizon, think about the history that lies beneath the surface. Think about the Megalodon, the Mosasaurus, and the Predator X. Think about the millions of years of evolution that led to the world we know today. The ocean is old, and it has seen things we can only begin to imagine. It is a place of wonder, a place of mystery, and for a long, long time it was a place of absolute terror. Nature has a way of moving on, but the bones remain as a warning and a reminder of where we came from. We are part of a lineage that survived the shadows of these giants. We are the ones who get to tell their story. And what a story it is. A story of massive sharks, armored fish, and sea serpents that actually existed. It is a story that proves reality is often much more incredible and much more terrifying than any fiction we could ever create. Keep your eyes on the water, because the deep always has more secrets to reveal, and the next discovery might be even more mind-blowing than the last. Until then, we can only look at these ancient bones and wonder what it was truly like to live in the age of the sea monsters.